So, a cardiac fáin an fáilte go like Comhionannas do Scoil Gheimhridh Uí Chadhain fiad dá. I'd like to give you all a warm welcome to Comhionannas in Glór and Móna, the youth and community organisation that connects the revival of the Irish language with community regeneration and development in Upper Springfield and the surrounding areas beyond West Belfast. Radical politics are at the heart of Glór and Móna, and questions of decolonisation, socialism, grassroots community activism, the importance of youth and political education are frequently on the agenda here. Therefore, it fills us with hope to see that the question of Irish unity is gradually gaining momentum, and the Glór and Móna community have attended recent Ireland's future events, as well as others, particularly the Fuascailt and Éire, organised by Trademark and Black. These have been particularly influential in terms of joining the conversation and even organising Scoil Gheimhridh Uí Chadhain, which we are here now, in solidarity with other brilliant activists. I'd like to thank them all for helping to organise this. Scoil Gheimhridh Uí Chadhain, named after the Irish-speaking radical socialist Republican Martin O'Kane, whose influential words inspired the paperwork that goes on here today, when he said, "We're the most fiercest challenge against the ruling class, against injustice, for and with the most vulnerable and poorest people, may there be that Irish Faoi." To that end, we also want to seize the opportunity to bring together left-wing movements and activists in solidarity as comrades to discuss these issues and share with each other the different but not so different daily work we are all doing. Political education is at the centre of this Scoil Gheimhridh, or winter school in English, particularly regarding society's major issues: United Ireland, climate change, Irish language revival, housing, health and much more through the lens of left-wing and class politics. It is a great honour to launch Scoil Gheimhridh Uí Chadhain 2022 with a special conversation between the grassroots activist Desi Donnelly and their guest speaker today, the left-wing economist and ex-finance minister of Greece, Yanis Varoufakis. Really was more.
Yanis, Culture Road to Belfast, even virtually as it is. I suppose I was actually the first person that wanted to conduct this interview was going to be Bernadette McAliskey. She was unavailable, and I'm aware of how poor substitute it is for this, but it's all we've got for now. So, in terms of the format, I thought we'd have a bit of a Q&A for half an hour, and then open it up so other people here could ask you questions as well. If that suits you, okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Sure, by all means.
Fantastic. We're really delighted to have you. You know, you don't need an intro. Everyone in the room knows who you are. And really, Owen gave a bit of an intro in terms of what we're doing, and a lot of the questions that we're grappling with in terms of the constitutional future of Ireland. We know through your different guises of activism that you've had as a popular economist, as a politician, Minister of Finance, that you've grappled with a lot of these questions as well in a very practical sense. So we're really kind of we're interested to get your perspective, your experience, your expertise to kind of help us struggle with some of these questions as well. I'll start off with kind of a very broad question, but I think the last time you were physically in Belfast was 2018. I think you spoke in the Sunflower Bar. I wasn't there. I've spent a lot of money buying pints in the Sunflower since then, but I missed you on that evening. But I remember that I've listened to the talk since, and it was really kind of, just before the 2019 EU elections. You were talking about DiEM25's strategy for the EU elections, and since that 2018 date, there's been many changes in the world. Intensification of existing conflicts. So you had the COVID pandemic, you have Ukraine, the kind of heightened tensions around the emergence of a multipolar world. And we're just kind of interested to hear how your own activism and your movement has adapted and evolved over this period.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. Can I start with the little breakfast, if I may? Because I feel awkward being the guest of honor. I don't speak Irish. I wish I did. I am not an expert on Irish reunification, except that for some reason, from a very young age, I had an affinity for your cause. And I would like to share a little story about this. I was very enthusiastic at learning the piano from a very young age, and but I was very bored with Mozart and all the classical bits. You might be thinking, what is he going on about? Well, let me tell you, the story how it connects to Irish unity and the Irish cause. So my piano teacher was a very progressive, fantastic woman, Greek woman here in Athens, right? She said, okay, look, forget the classical stuff, I will teach you a piano piece by a banned Greek composer at the time. And so I did a music score, and there were the lyrics as well. I had never heard of the song. It was a Greek song, actually in Greek. But it turns out, it was talking about it was a song grieving for a fallen hero, a revolutionary. And I assumed it was some Greek bloke. We had so many conflicts and civil wars and revolutions failed, most of them, that, you know, there was a plethora of potential people that could fit the bill. And it was only years later when I realized that this was not a Greek poem that was put to music. By the way, by that time I had actually loved to play that song, and I still play it because it really fits my heart. But the actual lyrics, when I read them in English, not in Irish, but in English, it might remind you something. And the Greek translation very close was something like it went like it was on an August morning, all in the dawning hours, I went to take the warming air, all in the mouth of the flowers. And there I saw a maiden, and mournful was her cry. And she was saying, oh, but we mend my golden heart, I've lost my loving boy. And of course now you know what that song was. I was 6, 7 when I was learning to play that. It was about Michael Collins. And I only found out that it was an Irish revolutionary that this song was all about 10 years later. And that was about the time when I moved to England. And I remember it was my first week at the University of Essex in Colchester in England. And as fresh men and women, there are all these stalls to join societies and all the usual paraphernalia of first week, undergraduate era. And I saw a stall with an inscription, "Troops Out Now." And I was drawn to it, and I joined the Troops Out movement at the age of 17 in Colchester, Essex. So these are my credentials for being a journalist. Okay? It didn't do much good to my political career, or not political career, any career. When I got a scholarship to go to the United States a few years later, I was not given a visa by the American Embassy. Which I consider to be a medal of honor. Anyway, so back to your question, what has changed since 2018? Well, I think that, in a way, everything has been going down the toilet globally, except the cause. Because, unbeknownst to the Boris Johnsons and Nigel Farages of the world, Brexit, for all its ills regarding the people of Britain, whatever ills there might have been, has been a magnificent boost for the cause of Irish unity. Essentially, it put Irish reunification back on the agenda. And the greatest threat to Irish reunification today is the establishment in the Republic, who don't seem to be very willing to proceed with this. They can't say it, but I think they're threatening that. And that's yet another reason to pursue Irish reunification. Going back to my less than scientific statement that everything's going down the toilet, the European Union is fragmenting. It has been fragmenting since 2008, since the great financial crisis, which the architecture of the euro currency was never meant to withstand. It was never designed for something like that. It was a bit like taking a fine riverboat and throwing it in the Atlantic. When the weather is nice, it sails beautifully. First storm, it starts sinking. But the analogy stops there because it never actually sinks. What happens is the many, the majority, are constantly plundered by the very few. The European Central Bank will always take care of the bankers and of the conglomerates. And what there is a constant drainage of the capacity of the many to reproduce their lives. And the result is because there is a total failure on our part, on the progressive internationalist left, to put forward an agenda that actually resonates with people. And that is a self-criticism as well. The result is that all this discontent and anger and fear feeds the fascists, who appear in a variety of forms. Some of them appear as radical centrists, Blairites, others appear as black shirts, but all these bastards, excuse my unscientific terminology, find ways of coalescing. Look at the Italian government today. It's a new fascist government by a lady who spent all her life proclaiming her admiration for Benito Mussolini, and who today is the darling of the centre, of the liberal democratic centre. Yeah, things are not going well. Say a few words of self-criticism regarding the political agenda. When you were there in 2018, I was flogging the new Green New Deal for Europe. Green 25 is magnificent, very large, very technically competent, extremely progressive agenda. Who cares? I mean, except for 1.5 million people who voted for it. It sounds like a lot, but it's not in the grand European scheme of things. We have about 300 million voters, 1.5 voted for that agenda. Still better than nothing. I don't regret doing it. But it takes a huge stretch of imagination to think that this was successful. And moreover, the war in Ukraine has put a dent into that coalition. Because some of the comrades with whom we stood side by side in 2019 with the Green New Deal for Europe, Green New Deal for Europe, the moment Putin's troops invaded the Ukraine, and I'm referring now to our comrades, or former comrades, in Poland, the political party called Razem, R-A-Z-E-M, which means together. These were colleagues. We formed the Pan-European Alliance in 2019 together. First thing they did, well, actually, second thing they did. First, they attacked Putin, quite rightly so, for having invaded the Ukraine. Second thing was to attack me personally and to split from there. Why? Because I came out with a statement that I thought every left would have come up with, which is that war cannot be addressed with military means. More war is not the solution to war. I came out to defend outright the invaded Ukrainians and to say that even arming them was very logical. If my home had been invaded, I would have liked the rest of the world to arm me. But the solution was not arms. The solution was an immediate ceasefire, a return to barracks by the Russian troops, and some kind of political arrangement between Washington and Moscow, which I thought was, if anybody would attack me from the left, they would have attacked me for being too reasonable and too middle of the road. And our comrades in Poland have put me on a hit list, effectively. Me, Noam Chomsky, Roger Waters, Brian Eno, the same people who are being lambasted for taking the side of Palestinians and taking the side of Republicans in Ireland and so on, are now being lambasted for taking the side, or actually for not taking the side of NATO, for not accepting the notion that NATO is an anti-colonial alliance. So things have been really occurred.
two things that I want to follow up with on that. One is Brexit, and then one is the kind of wider geopolitics stuff. And Brexit is, as you said, it's been a real catalyst for progressive discussions around United Ireland. It's not the only, it's not the only catalyst around there. There's demographic changes. There's been really a dysfunctional government in the north, successive failure to implement the Good Friday Agreement. In the south, you see Sinn Féin's rise on a very much more popular electoral base as well, and also growth of English nationalism. And what they say about the Brexit is it's been a critical factor swaying many people who would have been kind of undecided before. You'll have people from traditionally a unionist background, small businesses, and kind of people who tie their European identity in with kind of broader EU institutions. And thinking about how progressives grapple with that, because the EU is a fundamentally undemocratic beast. And interested, and about, it might be kind of harking back to kind of your stance around 2018 and all, but with the Green New Deal you had, there was a concept that the institutions of the EU could be democratized and mobilized in a very progressive cause. Do you still believe that? And how could that be done?
I believe this less than I did in 2018 when we last met. I've grown more pessimistic, not because of some psychological process within my soul, but because the European Union has shown a remarkable incapacity to use opportunities that come its way in order to reform and in order to become more civilized and in order to embrace the interests of the many. Every time, they never miss an opportunity to integrate and to move towards some kind of federation. Because let's face it, once you've created a modern union, either you're going to federate and have all the instruments of a federal state at your disposal to deal with the capitalist crisis, which eventually and inevitably will hit, or the whole thing goes to the dogs. So I'm increasingly pessimistic, but here I'm going to think as an Irish Republican. I hope you will allow me. It will be suicidal for you folks, for us, to try to make a case for United Ireland outside the European Union. It will be a mistake. It will be tactically a mistake, strategically a mistake, conceptually a mistake. I think that the position should be, it is our position here in Greece. My party here, Meta 25, we just came out of a parliamentary debate yesterday, and what I said was that this European Union sucks big time. It is constitutionally oriented towards the interests of the worst of the oligarchy. But I don't believe that we can reform it anymore. I thought we could reform it 5-6 years ago. It was possible. Through what we called the DiEM25, not civil disobedience, but governmental disobedience. If we were to win government and our governments played the role of a recalcitrant in the European Union and vetoed stuff until the right kind of reform was implemented. But I don't believe that it's possible. It is still possible to transform, not reform, to transform through conflict within. So there is a fundamental difference between, for instance, if you're a revolutionary socialist, communist, whatever, you don't believe in tearing the state down. You believe in transforming it by taking it over. I think this is a good position to have regarding the institution. So let me give you a very practical example. The European Investment Bank. It's an institution that we should create even if it didn't exist. It's there. Why pull it down? Let's take it over and transform it so that it actually invests into things society needs. It's got the mechanisms to do it. It doesn't have the political personnel that are interested in doing it. But that's for us, for the polity, for the demos, to find a solution. So I think that the line of progressives in Ireland, north and south of the border, should be Brexit was the prime example of unionist self-harm, because it simply put them in a situation where they're damned if they do, damned if they don't. Unless they come out with a radical unionist position of re-erecting the border and turning Northern Ireland into a castle, a fortification. But then they will lose their own young people, the young unionists, the members of the Protestant community who are under 30 will abandon them, which will be fantastic. And even if they don't do that, again, it's not possible to make Brexit work if you're a unionist. And I think that's a great thing, a great asset to exploit. But my concern will be the South, the Republic. The Republic is being ruled by a cabal of multinationals on the one hand, and people who are in the pockets of multinationals and who make a huge amount of money by being in the pockets of multinationals. Now they look at you, folks, as the enemy, as the in the same way that the British Empire representatives looked at the Indians in Bombay during the Raj. This is how the ruling class in Dublin look at you. And they are threatened by. They don't care, they don't mind the reunification. It's just that anything like a reunification would rock the boat, and they don't want the boat rocked. If they could press a button and freeze everything, they would. But thankfully, the one good thing about the capitalist dynamic is that nothing can be frozen. The beast produces its own crisis, its own instabilities, and therefore we have an opportunity to take advantage of these instabilities in order to reunite people, reunite our lands, and overcome sectarianism and overcome racism, effectively.
Thanks, Jonathan. I'm going to just follow up here. We'll open it up to the floor quite shortly here, but one of the issues we'd like to kind of explore deeper is, Ireland has a tradition of neutrality and non-aligning with the southern state, which is as cherished as it is much abused. You think about it, ever since the 2001 Iraq War, Shannon's been used by the US military to charge lives through. Also on top of that, the Irish government's participation in NATO's partnership for peace, which really dilutes, and then growing talk of the militarization of the EU as well. With the kind of increasing emergence of the multipolar world and all this sort of geopolitical blocks, where do you think the space is for military non-alignment and neutrality today?
Non-alignment is a cherished idea for me. In fact, since you mentioned it, back in May, our party had our Congress, our first Congress here in Athens. It's a new party. We were set up in 2018. We had our first full Congress, delayed by 2 years due to COVID, here in Athens. And Jeremy Corbyn was here, our main guest of honor, together with the Turkish comrade Éire Merkuran, fantastic writer and activist. And the three of us issued the so-called Athens Declaration. The Athens Declaration was all about the need for a new non-aligned movement, which is a need which is becoming exponentially more important. Firstly, due to the war in Ukraine, and secondly, due to the escalating new Cold War that Donald Trump began between the United States and China, and which Joe Biden now is turbocharging. As leftists, as progressives, we should never take sides. We will never take sides with, for instance, between Putin and NATO. I reject both equally, and it is our moral duty to reject both. In the same way that in the 1960s and 1970s, progressives had a duty to reject the nuclear arms race and take a non-aligned movement perspective in favor of nuclear disarmament and in opposition to the interesting dialectic and lethal dialectic between the United States back then and the Soviet Union, I think we have an obligation to do the same thing today. We're not going to take the position of China in the new Cold War, but at the same time we will defend the right of the Chinese people to progress, which the United States is denying them. We are going to raise arms against the Iranian neo-fascist theocratic regime in Tehran in favor of the women, the students, the workers who are rising up against the regime in Tehran, but at the same time we will defend Tehran and Iran from the United States CIA-backed attempts at regime change, attempts at sucking into neoliberal territory the whole of Iran as it is today. That's what non-alignment means. In that context, a united Ireland must be part of the non-aligned movement. The best defense for our people is not American arms, it is non-alignment.
Thanks, Yanis. I'm just going to give you one more question before we kind of open up the floor. This is about sort of the prospect of really using the constitutional change process in Ireland as a way of democratic renewal. In the South, over the last decade, there's been a really sort of interesting series of citizens' assemblies. You know, look at same-sex marriage, look at abortion, which then led to popular referendums. And just in the last month, the Citizens' Assembly of Ireland University is recommending a referendum on the rights of nature being brought into the Constitution, Ecuador Constitution 2008. What's been telling about all of these processes is how much more progressive the people are in the political establishment, and they're way ahead when it comes to a lot of these matters as well. And you know, the contradiction in that is this is not finding a political voice when it comes to political representation in liberal democracy. So what I was wondering is, you know, in terms of the movements that you've been involved in, I mean, how are you grappling with this kind of archaic liberal democratic structure of representative democracy, which isn't really capable of addressing the big issues that we face today?
It's funny you should mention that, but I use the example of the Irish citizens' assemblies all the time. Here in Greece, in Germany, in Italy, last week I was in Italy, I was using that example. In response to the question, okay, if you don't like the way parliamentary democracy works, because it doesn't work, let's face it, what's the alternative? Are you an anti-parliamentarian? No, I'm not an anti-parliamentarian, but I do believe in the concept of the deliberative citizens' assemblies working side by side in Parliament with elected representatives. And if it's now, we've been working on this now with DM, with my party, in Greece, we've been working on this concept for 7 years. And we have actually, I think, advanced it quite substantially, for instance, when it comes to education policy. Our party here in Greece advocates the end of the management and micromanagement in particular of the educational system of high schools, primary education, universities and so on by the Ministry of Education. We are proposing a permanent assembly. We call it a National Education Council, Deliberative Council, comprising a number of people, from 2/3 will be randomly selected jurors. But of course, using again the Irish example, it's not just a random number generator that selects them. It selects from different groups, for instance, from high school teachers, from primary school teachers, from kindergartens, from universities, from students, from parents, from people, from citizens who are not parents, because they should have a say as well, because they're paying for education. We do the same thing regarding media. Who should regulate the media? We don't believe the government should regulate the media, because the government is always captured by the media owners. So the idea of citizens' assemblies, of a variety of citizens' assemblies, and also a constitutional citizens' assembly. We propose the European Constitutional Citizens' Assembly, in the 2019 election. I remember that was just one of our deemed very valid proposals. So I think we are completely in sync on this. And as I said, the Irish experiments, successful experiments, I should say, with citizens' assemblies are constantly in my speeches and in my presentations.
Thanks, Yanis. We're going to open up the floor here just to ask some questions. Whatever would like to chip in here, we'll just take one at a time. Here. Maybe just give an introduction to who you are.
Okay, hi, Yanis, Spencer Kieran from Belfast here, work with the organisation this is being hosted in Móna. And I just want, we had a session today that kind of the kickstart the weekend of events, and some people were talking about their motivations and what was concerning them in terms of what was happening in Ireland. And somebody had mentioned the rise of the far right in Ireland. Thankfully, we've been insulated from that for so long, given that kind of open fascism is rooted in colonial supremacy because of our colonial past. I think we have never really had any type of fascist movements here in Ireland. The large degree, there was exceptions certainly in the 30s and stuff, but they never really had mass appeal. But we can see the beginnings of people that were weirdos and cranks and completely alienated from society are now attracting bigger and bigger crowds at protests that are openly fascist, openly hostile to migrants, openly racist. And it's things that it's something that's a concern a lot of people, and obviously it's still in small scale compared to what's happening in the rest of Europe. You had mentioned the election of Molina in Italy. We've seen the rise of Marine Le Pen in France and similar movements in Holland and also in Germany. And I think, you know, this is all being compounded or being allowed by a complete inaptitude at best and absence at worst of any type of left alternative, certainly at a political level, but probably more depressingly at a civic society.
I didn't get the last part. Can you repeat the last part?
Yeah, the rise of the right and the rise of fascist movements has been compounded by the absence at a political level, certainly, but also at a civic society level of any left alternative, any popular left alternative. When you look at it, certainly from 2008 on, the material conditions on the face of it would appear to lend themselves to popular left-wing movements. But that hasn't happened. And I just wanted to find out your thoughts on why that would be and any ideas or strategies in terms of how we rebuild a popular left alternative.
I don't have any pearls of wisdom, I'm afraid. I'm completely bamboozled by what decides whether the crowds coalesce, whether people get together, when they get together, when they don't get together. I have never managed to predict it. There were moments, and you're looking back, 40 years back, there were times when I thought, all hell is going to break loose now. People will get together, this can't go on like this. People will stay now, and it didn't happen. And then there were other times when I was expecting nothing, and suddenly things are happening. So my capacity to answer that question is severely circumscribed. So what I try to do is I try to work as if every single day is pregnant with a grand mobilization and work to that, in that direction.
Thanks, Yanis.
Thanks very much, Yanis. This has been excellent. And I was just hoping to bring your attention. Kieran was talking earlier on in program, maybe also work here with Móna. One of the things we were speaking about today was the importance of social movements outside of the parish of the political structure. And one of the things that we have found is trying to think through your own experiences, but maybe you could share about what happened with yourself in Silesia and how sometimes political power can be overwhelmed and how there's a need to have structures outside of those political power to hold their feet to the fire and to ensure that a progressive movement or a progressive agenda can get through. Perhaps you can share your own experiences of what went well and what didn't go so well in Greece.
It's impossible to underestimate the importance of social movements and also the importance of having a political party or political parties that know their own limits, that they develop a relationship with social movements which is not hegemonic. Because the tragedy in my country here was that in 2010, when Ireland and Greece went bankrupt as a result of the euro crisis, the political party with which I ended up being in government a few years later had 4% of the vote. 4% of the vote. That's all we had. But the social movements were strong, and they became stronger the greater the discontent and the deeper the recession and the depression were. You had movements solidarity movements looking after the elderly, looking after the weak, providing medical assistance and meals on wheels to people that would otherwise have died. And they got very strong. They were sit-ins in factories that had closed down, which then from sit-ins they evolved into cooperatives that took over the factory and actually made it work profitably in some occasions. The very factory that was bankrupt and the capitalists shut down then became profitable, mighty profitable, under worker management. These were all magnificent examples of social movements. It was on the back of those social movements that political party Syriza started growing. From 4%, we went to 19%, and then eventually we went up to 40%. 36, 40%, something like that. And magnificent, it's sort of stratospheric increase in 2 years. In 2 years, that was how deep the crisis was. I joined the government because of the social movements, because I thought, and I still think that if the revolutionary moment happened, not the moment that we entered government, but the moment that when, as a government, we would stop the revolution. In other words, we would clash with Frankfurt and Berlin and Brussels and Washington, D.C., right? And go our own way if needs be. We have our own currency in order to cut the debt of the minimum. I was banking on social movements to do that which they were doing already, to provide the infrastructure that our state could not provide because our state was bankrupt and it was falling down. And I'm still to this day convinced that social movements could have done it. Which brings me to a moment back in June of 2015, one of the ugliest and saddest days of my life, when it became clear to me that my comrade and Prime Minister Alex Tsipras was about to throw in the towel and surrender to the creditors. And I remember saying to him, he was saying, we're not ready for the rapture. We're not ready for the rapture. I said, well, maybe you're not, but the people out there are. The social movements there are ready for it. He said, no, they're not. They will fizzle out. And you know what made them fizzle out? The surrender. It wasn't the rapture that made them fizzle out. It was the surrender by a government that used them in order to rise to power and then dump them in the interests of, reasonableness. And the social movements here in this country, this is me sharing my experience from Greece with you, never recovered. I mean, they're still there, but not the way they were. They're very bitter, very few compared to the numbers we had before 2015. And our party is trying to revive them, but not in order to sit on their coattails and be taken into government. No, we are there today as Mayor 25 to help the movements, not so that the movements help us. I think that is essential in terms of the dialectical relationship between electoral mechanisms, parties called not might, and social movements.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up question on that, Yanis? And it's the relationship between the party and the social movements. Like, do you ever envisage structural relationships between the two, or keep it kind of distant?
Keep it distant. Not distant, very close, but not structural. Yeah? The state power has a capacity to infect and to molest social movements. Keep them apart. The party should be there in order to change the legislation, provide funding, right? Not superstructures, in which will have the capacity in the end of perverting the whole alliance.
Okay, I forgot to say that we've got a following on Facebook Live, so if any of the happy campers on Facebook want to post a question, go ahead. I'll get it here, fella.
We have a question here now.
Yep, go ahead.
Hi Yanis, it's lovely to have you here with us this evening. I'm a medically retired school teacher, and I suppose I've always wanted a united Ireland. My question is, since 2016, we've seen unfair or interference in elections, and if we get to the stage where a border poll happens, and I know you said the South is our biggest stumbling block, and I believe you're right, how do we ensure that it's a free and fair and democratic election, free from interference, when the media are already going at anyone putting their head above the parapet, just like Corbyn, just like Chomsky, just like Bernie Sanders, and maybe you come up with your left-wing progressive social strategies. They just want to attack because they want to protect their own interests. So I suppose it's more about when we get to that stage rather than the planning of. How do we ensure that it's like free from interference and it's fair?
Popular participation. Mass participation. Mass popular participation can overcome the oligarchic systemic media. We've seen it before. I mean, one of the great aspects of 2015 here in Greece was that we rose to government. With every single television channel and radio station shitting on us. Every single one of them. There was one that was nuanced even. You know, they were sloping the line. You know, the one line. The party line was, if these people get into government, it's Armageddon. Not only to get into government, but in the 6 months when we were resisting the oligarchy without borders, as I call them, our approval ratings went up from 36-37% to 80%. 80%. This is unprecedented. And it was when we were at that high, we got 62% of the vote in the referendum to clash against everyone. The media, the oligarchs, the ECB, the European Union Council, the International Monetary Fund, the United States of America, the Federal Republic of Germany. We had everyone against us, and we got 62% of the vote, right? With the whole of the media world, Greek and non-Greek, dumping on us. So it can be done. Mass participation and exciting people, making people feel that this is, you know, this is their thing. And it's remarkable, once you reach a certain threshold, the more toxic the media become, the more people turn away from it. But you need to reach that threshold. Until you reach that threshold, it can't be done.
Thank you.
Yanis, I have a question. My name is Conor Shakish. I work here in Móna. I was just wondering, just a bit of a aside here, but see if we can connect it in some way. But your book, Another Now, and particularly your character Costa, I want to know if you could maybe just give us a quick summary on number one, why you went for a novel and not, you know, a standard type of book that you wrote before, and is there any lessons in that book that you believe may be useful in the wider debate in terms of a united Ireland and a new economy?
Did you want to speak about the whole design of the economy or some particular aspect that we didn't get it?
Just in relation to Costa, the character, Costa, yeah, beg your pardon.
Because I read the book.
A bit of shameless promotion for yourself there.
Thank you for it. This book is very dear to my heart, and it's a very strange book. And I feel very strange and very weird if I haven't written it, because for those of you who don't know what it is, actually there is an Irish element to this too. Some years ago, I published an introduction to capitalism, which I called Talking to My Daughter, A Brief History of Capitalism. And it was reviewed in the Irish Times by the Republic's Mr. Bainigí, the finance minister, who is not exactly a friend of mine politically or methodologically as an economist, but he actually was very kind about the book. He wrote really good things about the book. He said, this is a great book, if you want to see how banks work, read that book. That would be very strange and good stuff. At the end, of course, he had to take a swipe at me. Because we're political opponents, right? And he said, okay, so it's clear that Mr. Varoufakis doesn't like capitalism. He said a lot of stuff that you can't possibly like about capitalism, but what's the alternative, mate? And of course, I wasn't expecting Bainigí to ask me that question. This question was always perennially on my mind, because we of the left don't have an answer to this question. Once upon a time, we had the question, the answer was, central planning Soviet Union, when the Soviet Union seemed to be doing reasonably well in the 50th century. But this is not an answer we can come up with now and not be laughed out of court. Who wants the Soviet economy today? And at that point I thought, you know what, I need to answer that question. And what is the particular question? Could we have a non-capitalist, socialist, democratic, participatory social economy given the same technologies? I'm not talking about some futuristic thing, when you have Star Trek-like replicators producing everything, and with the same fallible, fallen human nature. So, with us, the human stock we have, and the capital stock that we have, could we have a functioning democratic socialist society? What would it look like? How would companies work? What about money? Would there be banks? Would there be central banks? Who would own them? What would they do with it? And I thought, okay. I started writing, spent the weekend trying to begin writing that book. And every paragraph I wrote, I deleted it, because I ended up disagreeing with it the moment I completed it. So I thought, shit, I can't do this. I can't write this book. And then it hit me that the reason why I couldn't write this book was because I constantly disagreed with myself. Because when it comes to explaining how capitalism works, I don't disagree a lot with myself. I disagree with other people. But I think I know how capitalism works, and I can describe it to you. I can analyze, so hard. But when it comes to designing an alternative socioeconomic system, right, then I constantly disagree with myself. So I thought, hang on a second, this is why people write fiction. Because if you write a novel, you can put different characters in, each with a different view, and then they can take it out on one another. They can have a debate between them. So I created characters and I gave them different perspectives that are harboring and nestling within my own mind and soul. And I made them fight it out. But the whole point was to describe, what I did, since the other this book, I might as well tell you about the story, it doesn't matter, you probably won't leave. The idea was, so I used science fiction, because I'm also a science fiction buff. But no, there wasn't a lot of technology. What there was there are these three people, Costa, Iris, and Ita. And at some point, due to some malfunction of an invention by Costa, who is a technologist, they gain access to an alternative timeline, an alternative now. That's why the book is called Another Now, which split from our now in 2008 due to the great financial crisis. So imagine if the Occupy Wall Street and Occupy London and Occupy the Dignados in Spain and here the revolution in Athens, in Square and so on. Imagine we had done it right and we had taken over the world. We had taken over capital and government. What would we have created and how would that transition have taken place and what kind of social economy would it produce? So Costa, Iris and Eva and gain access to their own selves, and each one can talk to himself or herself in the other now, and they have conversations, they exchange emails, effectively. And the trio back in the other now, they're very surprised that capitalism could have survived in our now, and they think that this is prejudice, they just can't believe it. And our lot here cannot believe that the socialist democratic socialist regime could have emerged internationally in the other trajectory. So that's the context, okay? Now, since you asked me about Costa, I chose the three characters to be representatives of three different kinds of defeat. You see, I like defeat. I'm a drama queen. I'm history, tragedy. I think defeat is what creates new prospects and new hope. You have to experience a big crushing defeat before you can rise up. I mean, I'm not a Christian, but I'm all into redemption and recovery, catharsis, and renaissance. So what are the three defeats that these people represent? Iris is a Marxist feminist, very radical left winger, anthropologist and so on, who is crushed by both the Margaret Thatcherism, the success of the right, and the authoritarianism of the left. That anybody who has been in a political left-wing organization has experienced, right? My father always said to me, my father spent years in a concentration camp for communists. And he always used to say to me that his greatest fear, when he was in a prison camp for communists, that had his side won, he would be in the same prison camp with communist guards. So this is Irish, right? That kind of defeat. Defeat from the right and defeat from the party. And then there was Eva. Eva was the former Lehman Brothers financial engineer turned right-wing neoliberal economist. Somebody that I've worked with these people for decades, teaching economics, with neoliberal colleagues. Some of them were quite nice, actually. We couldn't see eye to eye methodologically, politically, but they were very nice, very pleasant people. And their economic models were very interesting. Nothing to do with capitalism, but very interesting mathematically. So Eva is one of them. And what defeat does she represent? 2008. Because in 2008, true libertarians who believe that the market always knows best were just as crushed in 2008 as communists were in 1991. Their whole world collapsed. They saw Lehman Brothers as a moment of truth for them, because they thought that something like that could never happen. So Eva is the neoliberal side of modernity that is crushed. Iris is the left-wing side of modernity that is crushed, and then Costa is a younger man compared to those two women, and he's a technologist. One of those people that got seriously an engineer. He became seriously enthused back in the 1980s and 1990s that digital technologies and the internet in particular could liberate you. So that's another hope, another modernity, another aspect of brand, of variety, of modernity, that technology will liberate us. There will be electronic democracy, there will be, the moment everybody can speak to everybody else, capitalism will not be able to constrain us. And of course, his hope crashes on the shoulders of big tech. And he becomes almost a digital terrorist. He starts trying to invent machines that will bring down big tech. And one of those machines malfunctions, and we gain access to the other now. Anyway, now I'll tell you the story.
I think you've sold a few books.
I don't know how it ends, and I haven't described to you how corporate companies work, how banks work in a democratic socialist world.
I'm definitely good at that for Christmas.
Yes.
Over here for Barry.
Yeah, just Barry, and then we'll wrap up. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Have you got a question?
There's the picture here now. So, hello, my name is Barry Fagan. So, just a wee question around the Green New Deal. You talked about the European Green New Deal, and then you had the Democratic Party Green New Deal in America, which has fell flat on its face. I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on the discourse around this Green New Deal and the possibilities hedged on the fact that it's trying to maintain a way of life and how we live our lives in the West, in the modern Western world, and is that sustainable in the future? Because it doesn't seem to reconcile itself with where we're going very, very quickly.
Yeah. Well, firstly, let me say that the Green New Deal that Alexandria, Ocasio-Cortez, and others, comrades of ours, in the United States put forward, I can understand why they did that, and it was a good thing that they did, but there's a fundamental difference between that and the Deal 25 Green New Deal for Europe. And I think that, interestingly, our European Green New Deal is closer to the spirit of the original FDR, Roosevelt New Deal, than that of the democratic socialists in the United States. I tried to convince them that they needed to be more radical. And they should salvage all the basic ideas of Roosevelt, which is you don't need to tax in order to invest. You just create the money. The financiers and the central banks create money all the time. But our comrades of the Democratic Party in the United States are more conservative than that. They want to be prudent. They hate the idea of being accused of proposing to pluck the money tree. Well, you can't do it by taxing. Whom are you going to tax? The rich are beyond reach in terms of their billions. Even Bezos, I mean, it's all liquid. If you've got 220 billion, it's not liquid stuff. It's in the stock exchange. If you try to tax it massively, the stock exchange will collapse and then you won't be able to get it. The poor have no money to pay taxes. So this was my criticism of my comrades in the United States. They were not radical enough. But more broadly, I think the time for the Green New Deal has passed. It was never going to be a fix for capitalism, because capitalism will not be fixed. It was never going to be, the cure for, what will civilize the capitalist world. The capitalist world will not be civilized. For us, indeed, the value is a stepping stone. During the great deflationary period after 2008, 2009, 2010, between, in other words, 2010 and 2020, we had an opportunity, if we were in government, like Roosevelt was in 1933 in government in the United States, to use the financial circuits and the tax office and the debt issuance office of large economic blocs like the United States, like the European Union, in order to fund massive investment in things society needs, from green energy, to green agriculture, to education, to health, and so on. And that would have been a great impediment to the rise of the right, the outer right of racism, and it would have given a fillip, a boost to the working classes, to the middle classes. And then we could talk business about transforming capitalism into something better. That opportunity has been missed now. And in any case, I remember there was this Polish economist, Michał Kalecki, who had issued a very interesting critique of the idea of a New Deal. Back then, in the 1930s, he had said, a critique of Keynesianism, if you want, that even if the governments are convinced that it is in the interest of capital to introduce Keynesian New Deal-like policies, and there's no doubt that it would be in the interest of capitalism at certain points, like in the 1930s, capitalism was saved by the New Deal, while of course many millions of Americans were also saved. Well, even if that is the case, the governments that are answerable to big business, who implement a Keynesian New Deal, the moment it starts working, well before it reaches its potential for empowering the many and ameliorating the greatest ill effects of the crisis, well before the Green New Deal reaches its potential, it will be discontinued. And I think Gillespie was right. But the problem here is it never started. And if it were to begin, it would have been cut down very soon afterwards. So, yes, the Green New Deal is always part of our toolbox, part of our weaponry, politically. When I rise in Parliament, I will do it next week when we have the budget, the national budget being debated here in Greece. I will use New Deal arguments as to why the government's austerity policies are stupid and what we would have done instead. So they remain very important rhetorical schemes, and also part of the project, part of the program that you need to put out there to people who are not politically motivated, but whom you want to attract with interesting ideas as to what could have been implemented today which is not being implemented. That, I think, is the usefulness of the Green New Deal. But I don't think that, I don't think of it the way I did 5-6 years ago as a major stepping stone to something better.
Yanis, thanks so much. Just conscious of time. Really appreciate the time you've given us. Then I'll just let you say a few closing remarks. But before you do that, just want to give a plug that tonight was really the launch of Glór Winter School. It's taking part tomorrow, and tomorrow we want to have talks from organisers across the island that are working on issues that we think are critical for a constitutional change process. So people organising with asylum seekers, organising with the homeless, looking at health investment in health services, alternative economy, and climate. Organisers from organisations that would be agnostic on the constitutional question by necessity, but are working on issues that we think need to be forefront in the constitutional debate. Because I think in response to Siobhan's question, you talked about how the antidote to that kind of kickback for power is mass participation. And when you talked about the Southern establishment being really one of the big barriers to unification, I think one of the big challenges that we have is that unification is seen as more an administrative process of merging services north and south, as opposed to creating something new and vibrant. And we need to kind of organise to do that. So that's on here tomorrow 11/4. So everyone come, you're more than welcome to come. And Yanis, get any closing remarks to get us on our way?
I've spoken enough. I just want to thank you for inviting me. Solidarity. What you just said in your closing remarks about bringing together the unification with general solidarity with refugees and those who need support in order to flourish as human beings in our own communities, speaks to my heart. So thank you for what you're doing.
Yanis Varoufakis, solidarity.